Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Michael Jordan's story begins in Wilmington, North Carolina, a small town that would forever be linked to one of the greatest basketball players the world would ever know. It was here, in this unassuming corner of the world, that Jordan's relentless pursuit of greatness began. Growing up in the early 1960s, Jordan wasn't born into a world of fame or wealth, but rather one where hard work and ambition were the foundation of his future success. As a child, Jordan was always competitive. He had a fierce desire to be the best at whatever he did. Whether it was playing basketball with his older brother, Larry, or competing in pickup games with friends, Jordan quickly developed a reputation for his relentless drive. His passion for the game, though, wasn't something that came overnight. It was something that grew with him, molded by experiences, and reinforced by the values instilled in him by his family. Jordan's family was deeply rooted in hard work. His father, James Jordan, was a pivotal figure in his life. James was a hardworking and committed man who, while working multiple jobs, made sure to always provide for his family. The lessons Jordan learned from his father about perseverance, discipline, and humility were crucial to his development as a person and an athlete. James wasn't just a father, he was also a coach in Jordan's early life, taking him to games, providing feedback, and teaching him to keep pushing, even when things got tough. But it wasn't just his father's influence that shaped Jordan. His mother, Dolores, was the steady hand that kept the family grounded. She balanced the challenges of raising a family with her own personal drive. Dolores was supportive of Jordan's dreams, but also kept him humble. She made sure he understood the value of hard work and that success came with sacrifice. In his early years, Jordan was aware that his family's financial situation wasn't lavish, but they made do with what they had. This grounded upbringing would lay the foundation for his resilience and tenacity on the basketball court. Jordan's high school years were pivotal. Though he was never the tallest or most physically gifted player when he started playing basketball, he was a fierce competitor, one who was willing to work harder than anyone else. He was driven by an innate desire to be the best, often working long hours after school to improve his game. His sophomore year of high school, however, proved to be a significant turning point. Despite his relentless efforts, Jordan was famously cut from the varsity basketball team. The rejection could have crushed many players, but not Jordan. Instead, it fueled an even deeper fire within him. Rather than allowing the setback to define him, Jordan used it as motivation. He spent countless hours in the gym, perfecting his skills. His determination was unshakable, and by his junior year, he was not only a starting player but the team's star. Jordan was the best player on the team, and his talent quickly earned him recognition from college scouts. His success wasn't just the result of his natural ability but his relentless commitment to being the hardest worker on the court. Jordan's growth as a basketball player wasn't just physical, it was mental. He learned how to overcome challenges and use rejection as a stepping stone. His drive to be the best wasn't about ego, it was about proving to himself that no obstacle was insurmountable. Every missed shot, every loss, and every moment of doubt became part of his journey to greatness. His competitive spirit was unmatched, and this would become one of the defining characteristics of his career. By the time he entered the University of North Carolina in 1981, Jordan had already established himself as a rising star in the world of basketball. Coach Dean Smith, a legendary figure in college basketball, saw Jordan's potential immediately. While Jordan wasn't yet the polished player that would later dominate the NBA, Smith recognized the raw talent and drive that would make Jordan a future superstar. Under Smith's guidance, Jordan developed further, learning to refine his skills and apply his relentless work ethic to a college-level game that was much more competitive than high school. Jordan's freshman year at UNC was the beginning of his transformation into the player that the world would eventually come to know. His first major moment came in the 1982 NCAA championship game, when Jordan hit a game-winning shot against Georgetown. That moment marked the beginning of Jordan's reputation as someone who could rise to the occasion when it mattered most. It was an early glimpse into the player who would dominate the NBA for the next 2 decades. Even as a freshman, Jordan displayed the poise and composure of a seasoned veteran. In the years that followed, Jordan's game continued to evolve. He became more than just a scorer, he developed into a complete player. His ability to play both offense and defense, to take over games when necessary, and to elevate his teammates set him apart from his peers. His time at UNC helped Jordan refine the fundamentals of his game, but it was his mental toughness, his ability to focus under pressure, and his passion for the game that truly set him on the path to greatness. By 1984, Jordan's time at North Carolina had come to an end. He had proven himself on the college level and was now ready to take the next step. He declared for the NBA draft, where he was selected third overall by the Chicago Bulls. Though there were questions about how his game would translate to the NBA, Jordan quickly silenced those doubts. In his rookie season, he averaged 28.2 points per game and earned the NBA's Rookie of the Year honors. It was clear that Michael Jordan was no ordinary player. His combination of talent, work ethic, and mental toughness was unlike anything the league had seen before. But even as Jordan began his professional career, he wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted to take the Bulls to the top. He had already tasted success in college, but the NBA was different. It was a league filled with established stars, and Jordan was just another rookie trying to find his place. What set Jordan apart, however, was his unwavering confidence in himself. He wasn't just hoping to succeed, he was determined to make it happen. As his career began, it was evident that Michael Jordan's potential was limitless. His relentless drive to be the best, his fearlessness on the court, and his refusal to accept mediocrity would become the driving forces behind his career. The Chicago Bulls were about to witness the rise of a legend, and the basketball world would soon be forever changed by the greatness that Jordan would bring. But Jordan's story was just beginning, and the best was yet to come. Michael Jordan's arrival in the NBA in 1984 was nothing short of a seismic shift for the league. The moment the Chicago Bulls selected him with the third overall pick, the NBA was immediately put on notice. Jordan wasn't just any rookie, he was the player who would change the game. His impact wasn't just about the points he would score or the accolades he would rack up, it was about the way he would redefine what it meant to be great in the NBA. Jordan's first season in Chicago was nothing short of explosive. He wasted no time showing the basketball world that he was not just another player trying to find his place. His first game in the NBA, where he dropped 16 points and showed flashes of his immense potential, was only the beginning. By the end of his rookie season, Jordan had established himself as a player who could take over games, score at will, and change the dynamics of any matchup. He averaged 28.2 points per game, and while his Bulls team wasn't immediately competitive, his individual brilliance was undeniable. His athleticism, scoring ability, and fierce drive quickly made him one of the most exciting players in the league. But despite his immediate success, Jordan's path to greatness wasn't a smooth one. The Chicago Bulls, though led by Jordan, were still a team in the midst of rebuilding. In those early years, Jordan was often forced to carry the heavy load by himself. His teammates, though talented, couldn't elevate their play to match his level of commitment and skill. This meant Jordan had to do more scoring, more leadership, more everything. It wasn't enough for him to simply be a star, he had to transform the entire team around him. It didn't take long for Jordan to start demanding more of those around him. The mental toughness and work ethic that had driven him from a teenager in Wilmington to a college star at UNC were now being applied to his professional career. He wasn't just setting personal goals, he was making his teammates understand that they needed to rise to his level if they wanted to succeed. His competitive spirit, often misinterpreted as arrogance, was in reality the driving force behind his greatness. By his third season, Jordan was not just the best player on the Bulls, he was becoming one of the best players in the league. But despite all his talent, the team's lack of success in the postseason weighed heavily on him. Jordan's drive wasn't just about being a dominant player during the regular season, it was about championships. He knew that his legacy wouldn't be defined by individual achievements, it would be defined by whether or not he could lead his team to the ultimate goal. During this time, the NBA was still dominated by powerhouse teams like the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. These teams had the talent and experience to compete at the highest level, and they were the ones Jordan's Bulls had to overcome if they wanted to claim a championship. The Celtics, with their Hall of Fame players like Larry Bird, were a particularly tough obstacle. They had a team that had been together for years, and their chemistry on the court was unmatched. The Lakers, led by Magic Johnson, were also a team with a championship pedigree that Jordan had yet to match. In 1986, Jordan faced off against the Celtics in the playoffs, and it became one of the most iconic moments of his early career. In Game 2 of the first round, Jordan dropped a record 63 points, a performance that, despite the loss, showed the league just what Jordan was capable of. That game wasn't just about scoring, it was about a player who could carry a team on his back, even against the most formidable of foes. That moment, more than any other, was a sign to the basketball world that Michael Jordan was coming, and that he was going to be a force for years to come. But even with his individual brilliance, the Bulls were still unable to break through. The Celtics eliminated the Bulls in that playoff series, and Jordan, despite the personal accomplishment of his 63-point game, was still looking for the elusive championship. The pressure to not only perform, but to lead his team to a title weighed on him. He knew that his legacy wouldn't be complete until he could bring a championship to Chicago. As Jordan's career progressed, his commitment to winning intensified. The Bulls were still growing as a team, but Jordan's personal evolution was undeniable. He became a more complete player, learning the value of defense, passing, and leadership. It wasn't enough to just score, Jordan needed to make his teammates better. He began to understand that in order to win championships, he would need more than just individual accolades. He would need a team that could consistently perform at a high level, day in and day out. In 1989, after several seasons of playoff disappointments, the Bulls found themselves in another high-stakes matchup with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was here that Jordan took another major step in his career. He hit one of the most iconic shots in NBA history. In Game 5 of the first round, with the Bulls trailing and the clock winding down, Jordan hit a buzzer-beater over Craig Ehlo to win the game and the series. The moment was a statement. Michael Jordan had arrived, not just as an individual talent, but as a player who could perform in the clutch, under immense pressure, with the game on the line. That shot was a sign that Jordan was no longer just a scorer, he was a champion in the making. With each passing season, Jordan's leadership and mental toughness grew. But it wasn't until the 1991 season, with the addition of key players like Scottie Pippen and the arrival of coach Phil Jackson, that the Bulls were truly ready to compete for a championship. Jackson's triangle offense was the perfect system to maximize Jordan's skills while creating opportunities for his teammates to shine. Pippen, now a full-fledged star in his own right, complemented Jordan perfectly, and the duo formed one of the most formidable partnerships in NBA history. The Bulls finally broke through in 1991, winning their first NBA championship in 6 games against the Los Angeles Lakers. For Jordan, the victory was sweet. It was the culmination of years of sacrifice, hard work, and relentless pursuit of greatness. He had finally reached the pinnacle of the NBA, and it was more than just an individual achievement, it was a team accomplishment. Jordan's leadership had carried the Bulls to the top, but it was his teammates who had helped him get there. This victory would set the stage for even greater success. Jordan's first championship was just the beginning. The Bulls went on to win 2 more championships in 1992 and 1993, completing their first three-peat. Jordan had proven that he could not only dominate the league but also lead his team to the ultimate goal. But even with 3 titles, Jordan wasn't content. He knew that to truly solidify his legacy, he would need more. And so, his journey continued, filled with new challenges, greater obstacles, and an unrelenting drive to be the best. As the NBA evolved, Jordan remained at the center of it all, setting a new standard for greatness in the process. After Michael Jordan secured his first three-peat with the Chicago Bulls, it was clear that he had firmly established himself as the centerpiece of a dynasty. However, the path ahead wasn't one of rest. Far from it. The 1990s would not only see Jordan's individual greatness continue to shine, but would also witness the evolution of the Bulls into an unparalleled force in NBA history. But with each championship, the pressure and expectations grew, not just on Jordan, but on the entire franchise. The 1992 season was pivotal. Coming off of a dominant victory over the Portland Trail Blazers in the 1992 NBA Finals, where Jordan was named Finals MVP for the second consecutive year, it was clear that he had become the face of the NBA. The combination of his skill, athleticism, and charisma had transformed the league. Jordan was no longer just a basketball player, he was a global icon. This was the height of the Jordan era. His endorsement deals, particularly with Nike and the Air Jordan line, had made him a household name worldwide. The NBA wasn't just a sport anymore, it was an entertainment phenomenon, and Jordan was its biggest star. Yet, despite all his off-the-court success, Jordan's drive on the court remained unmatched. After his second championship, he didn't slow down, he only accelerated. The 1992-93 season was one of his most dominant years, and his Bulls were poised to go for a third straight title. The team had found its rhythm, with Jordan, Pippen, and the rest of the supporting cast now completely in sync. Phil Jackson's triangle offense had proven to be the perfect system to maximize the team's potential, and Chicago's defense, led by Jordan and Pippen, was among the most suffocating in the league. However, Jordan's continued dominance wasn't without its challenges. The 1993 NBA Finals, where the Bulls met the Phoenix Suns, was a grueling series. The Suns, led by the prolific Charles Barkley, were an excellent team. Barkley himself had an MVP season, and the Suns were determined to give the Bulls a run for their money. But this was Jordan at his best. His ability to take over games when it mattered most was on full display in the finals, and despite an impressive series from Barkley, the Bulls triumphed in 6 games to complete their three-peat. Jordan's performance in the series was a perfect example of his growing legacy. He averaged 41 points per game in the finals, sealing his third consecutive Finals MVP award. Despite his continued success, there was something different in the air in the summer of 1993. Jordan had reached the pinnacle of success in basketball, but the burden of maintaining that level of excellence had begun to wear on him. His personal life had also been affected by the loss of his father, James Jordan, in a tragic and senseless murder earlier that year. The emotional toll was significant, and Jordan, who had always played with an intensity driven by his love of competition, suddenly found himself questioning his priorities. In July 1993, just a few months after securing his third consecutive title, Jordan stunned the sports world by announcing his retirement from basketball. At the peak of his career, Jordan walked away from the game that had defined him. For many, it seemed like the end of an era, and they struggled to comprehend what would come next for Jordan and the Bulls. The sport of basketball, which had been revolutionized by Jordan's influence, now faced the reality of life without its brightest star. Jordan's decision to retire was influenced by several factors, not just the loss of his father. He had reached a point where, despite his success, basketball had lost its luster. The mental and physical exhaustion of competing at the highest level for so long weighed on him. He needed a break. He wanted to do something different, something that wasn't tied to the game of basketball. So, in one of the most surprising moves in sports history, Michael Jordan walked away from the NBA at the age of 30. Jordan's decision was also influenced by his love of baseball. Having grown up watching his father's passion for the sport, Jordan had always harbored a dream of playing professional baseball. This love for the game had been with him throughout his life, and after his retirement from basketball, he signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox. Jordan's baseball journey took him to the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A affiliate. Although he was clearly not the same caliber of baseball player as he had been a basketball player, his time in baseball gave him a sense of peace that he hadn't felt for a long time. While Jordan's baseball career didn't pan out the way he had hoped, the time away from basketball allowed him to heal emotionally and gain clarity. His love for basketball was never gone, and in March 1995, after nearly 2 years away from the sport, Jordan made the monumental announcement that he was returning to the NBA. His famous statement, "I'm back," was made clear with a single, iconic sentence. Jordan was coming back to reclaim what he had left behind. When Jordan returned to the NBA, he wasn't the same physically as before. He had taken time off, and his body wasn't as young as it had once been. But his basketball IQ and competitive fire were as sharp as ever. He was ready to prove to the world that, despite the 2-year break, he still had what it took to be the best. His first few games back were somewhat rusty, but in typical Jordan fashion, he quickly found his rhythm. In his second game back, Jordan dropped 55 points on the New York Knicks, reminding everyone that he was still capable of performing at the highest level. Despite the challenges of returning to the NBA after a 2-year absence, Jordan's impact on the game was immediate. The Chicago Bulls, now a team of seasoned veterans with Scottie Pippen as Jordan's right-hand man, began to find their rhythm again. The return of Jordan sparked a new level of excitement in the league, and the Bulls quickly became a team to watch once more. Jordan's re-entry into the NBA wasn't just about individual accolades or proving his greatness. It was about restoring the Chicago Bulls' legacy, making them contenders again, and showing the world that his love for the game had never faded. The 1995-96 season saw the Bulls, now led by a reinvigorated Jordan, dominate the NBA. They finished the regular season with an NBA best 72-10 record, setting an NBA record for most wins in a single season. Jordan was named Finals MVP for the 4th time as the Bulls defeated the Seattle Supersonics in the finals, winning their 4th championship in 6 years. Jordan's return wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement. Through it all, Jordan's love for the game, his passion for winning, and his ability to elevate his team to greatness never wavered. His story was never just about the individual accolades, the MVPs, or the championships. It was about his unrelenting commitment to being the best, and his ability to inspire those around him to strive for greatness as well. As Jordan cemented his legacy with a second three-peat in 1997-98, it was clear that he had achieved something that transcended the game of basketball. Michael Jordan had redefined what it meant to be great, and his impact on the game would be felt for generations to come. As the 1996-97 NBA season unfolded, Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls were on the verge of something truly special. Coming off of an incredible 1995-96 season, where they had set an NBA record with 72 wins and secured their 4th championship in 6 years, the team was still riding high. Jordan, despite being older and coming off a 2-year hiatus from the game, was playing as if he had never left. His leadership, skill, and unrelenting will to win were at the forefront once again, and the Bulls had become the team to beat. Jordan's second stint in the NBA had been remarkable. After his return, he had shown that his time away from the game had not diminished his abilities in any way. In fact, his time off had only fueled his hunger for more success. Even as the competition in the NBA grew fiercer, Jordan's desire to prove himself never wavered. As he entered the 1996-97 season, there was an undeniable sense that this might be his last run with the Bulls, but no one could say for sure. His future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the team was still built around his brilliance, and as long as he was on the court, the Bulls were contenders. In the early months of the season, Jordan played with the same level of intensity that had characterized his entire career. His scoring was still as prolific as ever, but his influence on the game extended far beyond the points he put on the board. Jordan was a leader in every sense of the word. His approach to the game, his work ethic, his mental toughness, and his ability to push himself and his teammates to be better, was unmatched. The Bulls were again the dominant force in the league, and Jordan's return had brought a sense of confidence and stability to a team that had already experienced the highs and lows of his absence. The 1996-97 season wasn't just about Jordan. Scottie Pippen, who had blossomed into a superstar in Jordan's absence, was playing the best basketball of his career. The Bulls also had the addition of veteran players like Tony Kukoc and Steve Kerr, who brought experience and depth to the squad. The team was perfectly balanced, with a combination of skill, defense, and leadership. But the focal point of the team remained Jordan. It was his ability to dominate games and lead by example that made the Bulls such a formidable force. As the regular season progressed, the Bulls continued to win at an alarming rate. They were playing some of the best basketball in the league, and the rest of the NBA seemed to be trying to catch up. But the road to another championship was never easy. The competition in the Eastern Conference, in particular, was fierce. Teams like the Miami Heat, New York Knicks, and Cleveland Cavaliers were all hungry to dethrone the Bulls. But Jordan, as always, was focused. His laser-like concentration kept the Bulls on track, and by the time the playoffs arrived, they were primed for another deep run. In the first round of the 1997 playoffs, the Bulls faced the Washington Bullets. Jordan's influence on the court was evident from the start. He was still capable of taking over games, and in the series, he led the Bulls to a 4-1 victory. Jordan's scoring remained the focal point, but his ability to make everyone around him better was on full display. The Bulls cruised past the Bullets, but they knew that the real challenge was yet to come. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Bulls met their longtime rival, the Miami Heat. The Heat, led by Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway, were a talented team, and this series would prove to be a much tougher test for the Bulls. The Heat pushed the Bulls to their limits, but as always, it was Jordan's leadership and performance that made the difference. The series went to a decisive Game 5, where Jordan put up a stellar performance to close out the series. His ability to deliver in clutch moments was still unmatched, and the Bulls were once again headed to the NBA Finals. In the 1997 NBA Finals, the Bulls were set to face the Utah Jazz, led by Hall of Famers Karl Malone and John Stockton. The Jazz had been a rising team in the Western Conference for years, and this was their chance to finally make a breakthrough. The Jazz had the talent, the experience, and the desire to win a title, but they were facing a team led by Michael Jordan, who had shown time and time again that he could deliver on the biggest stage. The series was intense, with both teams playing at a high level. Jordan, who was now 34 years old, was playing some of the best basketball of his career. His scoring was still exceptional, but it was his leadership and defensive presence that made the biggest impact. Game 5 of the Finals, with the Bulls leading 3-2, would become one of the most iconic games in NBA history. Despite feeling under the weather, Jordan played through the pain, leading the Bulls to a crucial victory. His performance in what would later be dubbed the flu game remains one of the greatest individual performances in NBA history. Jordan scored 38 points while visibly sick, and his clutch plays in the final minutes were the difference in the game. The Bulls sealed the championship in Game 6, with Jordan's final shot securing the win. The victory marked the 6th championship of Jordan's career, and it was clear that even at an older age, he still had the ability to perform when it mattered most. The 1997 championship was his 5th Finals MVP award, and it solidified his status as not just the best player of his generation, but one of the greatest of all time. The 1997-98 season began with the Bulls looking to complete another three-peat, but there were signs that the team was nearing the end of an era. Phil Jackson, the architect of the Bulls' success, was in the final year of his contract, and there was uncertainty surrounding the team's future. The relationship between the Bulls' management and Jackson had become strained, and it was clear that changes were on the horizon. But despite the external drama and internal uncertainties, Jordan was focused. His goal was clear: win one more championship and go out on top. As the 1998 season progressed, it became increasingly evident that this would be Jordan's final year with the Bulls. The team, despite being older and having faced some adversity, was once again one of the best in the league. The regular season had its ups and downs, but when the playoffs arrived, the Bulls were ready to make another run at a championship. The Bulls' playoff journey in 1998 was full of drama and emotion. The team faced tough competition in the Eastern Conference, but Jordan's leadership and scoring ability kept the team on track. By the time they reached the NBA Finals, it was clear that the Bulls were once again the team to beat. They faced the Utah Jazz for the 2nd consecutive year, and this time, Jordan's presence was felt in every moment of the series. Despite some tough stretches, Jordan was still able to lead the Bulls to victory, securing his 6th and final NBA championship. The 1998 Finals would also be Jordan's final game as a Chicago Bull. With the clock ticking down and the game tied, Jordan took the ball and drove to the basket for a game-winning shot over the outstretched arms of Jazz defender Bryon Russell. That final moment, a moment of pure greatness, capped off one of the most remarkable careers in basketball history. Michael Jordan's sixth championship sealed his legacy as the greatest player the NBA had ever seen, and as he walked off the court for the final time, there was no doubt that his impact on the game would last forever. The Chicago Bulls had completed their second three-peat, and Michael Jordan had proven once again that greatness was in his DNA. The emotional weight of his retirement hung heavy over the basketball world, but there was no question that Jordan had done everything he set out to do and more. As the sun set on his playing career, Jordan's legacy was no longer just about the basketball courts. He had changed the game, redefined what it meant to be great, and influenced generations of players who would follow in his footsteps. The end of his career marked not just the closing of a chapter for the Bulls, but the closing of an era in the NBA. Michael Jordan had given everything to the game, and the basketball world would never be the same. After Michael Jordan's retirement in 1999, the basketball world was left reeling. The NBA had just witnessed one of the greatest careers in the history of the sport, and now its shining star was gone. The Chicago Bulls, once a dynasty led by Jordan, found themselves at a crossroads. The team's core, which had been built around Jordan and his partners, like Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, had been dismantled. The coaching staff, under Phil Jackson's leadership, was also shifting, and with Jordan's departure, the franchise needed to reimagine its future. Jordan's absence, however, didn't simply mean the end of an era for the Bulls, it marked a shift in the NBA as a whole. Jordan had elevated the game in ways that had never been seen before. His global influence through endorsements and his captivating on-court play had brought basketball into the mainstream in unprecedented ways. The Air Jordan brand had become synonymous with excellence, and the culture he helped foster would leave a lasting mark on the NBA for decades to come. But as the world adjusted to the idea of an NBA without Jordan, it was clear that his legacy would be more than just his 6 championships or his 5 MVP awards. Jordan had shown the world that basketball was more than just a game, it was a lifestyle. The question now was, could the NBA survive without Michael Jordan dominating the spotlight? In the years following his first retirement, the NBA had to shift its focus. Young stars like Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal began to emerge, bringing fresh excitement to the league. Still, there was no denying the void that Jordan had left behind. Even though new players rose to prominence, the standards Jordan set remained in place. The league wasn't going to simply replace Michael Jordan. It was forced to evolve without him, yet his presence was still keenly felt. His influence was so embedded in the game that his shadow loomed over every player who came after him. As Jordan adjusted to life away from the game, the call to return to basketball seemed impossible to ignore. In 2001, Jordan made the unexpected decision to return to the NBA, not with the Chicago Bulls, the team that had defined his career, but with the Washington Wizards. His first retirement had come abruptly, but his second departure seemed to be something more deliberate, a desire for one last challenge. At 38 years old, Jordan was past his prime, but his competitive nature was unchanged. He wasn't returning to reclaim titles or to prove that he could still be the best. Jordan was returning for the love of the game, and more importantly, to see if he could still dominate at the highest level, even with the years that had passed. The Washington Wizards were not championship contenders at the time of Jordan's return. The team had struggled for years, failing to reach the kind of competitive heights that Jordan was accustomed to. But Jordan wasn't looking for a championship team, he was looking for a team he could mentor. The Wizards were a young, talented team, and Jordan's leadership and experience were exactly what they needed. He was joining a roster that featured players like Jerry Stackhouse and Kwame Brown, players with potential but lacking the same level of winning experience that Jordan had. Jordan's impact on the Wizards was immediate, but it wasn't necessarily in the way people expected. While he was no longer the explosive force that had led the Bulls to 6 championships, his leadership and presence were undeniable. Jordan's influence on his teammates was invaluable. His work ethic, intensity, and approach to the game set a new standard for everyone around him. The young players quickly learned that to be great, they had to adopt Jordan's mindset. The Wizards were a much more competitive team with him on the floor, and they made the playoffs during his first season back. Jordan's return wasn't just about individual achievements, it was about proving that he could still be a force in the league. And while the Wizards' success wasn't as dramatic as his time with the Bulls, it was clear that his impact on the team was real. His numbers were still impressive. He averaged 22.9 points per game in his first season back, an incredible feat for a player in his late 30s. But it wasn't just about the points he scored, it was about the example he set for his teammates. Jordan's presence on the floor made the Wizards a legitimate contender, even if they were far from championship material. The story of Jordan's time with the Wizards was one of perseverance and passion. He was no longer the young, athletic player who had taken over the league in the 1990s. His body had begun to show signs of wear and tear. Yet, despite the challenges of playing at an advanced age for an NBA athlete, Jordan still delivered on the court. His leadership and his competitive fire were unmatched. He was playing at a high level, but his true value was in his ability to raise the level of everyone around him. The Wizards weren't winning championships, but they were competing at a level they had not reached in years. However, even Jordan knew that time was running out. His body, while still capable of performing at a high level, was no longer able to endure the rigors of a full NBA season. The physical toll of playing professional basketball, combined with the emotional strain of constantly competing at the highest level, led Jordan to make the difficult decision to retire for a second time in 2003. Though his time with the Wizards was short, it marked the end of his legendary career. Jordan's second retirement wasn't marked by fanfare or emotional goodbyes. His career had already been defined by some of the most iconic moments in sports history, and his farewell was as understated as his return had been. But even in his final season, Jordan proved that his legacy was never about the number of championships or MVPs he collected. It was about the impact he had on the game, his teammates, and the countless fans who had followed his career over the years. His final season with the Wizards served as a reminder that greatness is not defined by records or accolades alone, it's defined by a player's ability to inspire, to lead, and to leave a lasting impact on the world around him. When Michael Jordan left the NBA for the final time, it was the end of an era. The game of basketball had been irrevocably changed by his presence. He had taken the sport to new heights, brought an unmatched level of intensity to the game, and redefined what it meant to be a champion. Even after his retirement, his influence on the NBA, and on athletes across the globe, remained profound. Jordan's final years in the league were not defined by the quest for more titles, but by his desire to prove to himself that he still had the drive to compete at the highest level. And in that, he succeeded. Michael Jordan had given everything to basketball, and in doing so, he had left an indelible mark on the game that would never fade. His story was more than just the journey of a basketball player, it was the story of a man whose dedication to greatness had shaped the course of an entire sport. After Michael Jordan's second retirement from the NBA in 2003, it seemed as if the basketball world had lost its greatest player. The era of the Chicago Bulls' dominance, which had spanned much of the 1990s, had come to an end. The league, though, was evolving, and new stars were emerging. Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, and others were starting to create their own legacies. But despite their rising prominence, none could compare to Jordan in terms of influence and the precedent he had set. Jordan's absence left a void that the NBA was still trying to fill, and even though his physical presence was no longer in the game, his legacy remained larger than life. Jordan's departure, however, didn't signal the end of his relationship with basketball. In the years following his retirement, he remained an iconic figure in the sport, still widely regarded as the greatest to ever play the game. His role in the NBA had transcended the playing field. Jordan wasn't just a basketball player, he was a brand. His Air Jordan line with Nike continued to be one of the most popular and successful in the sports world, and his influence extended far beyond the court. Young players still looked up to him, and his name was synonymous with excellence. Despite all his success, Jordan couldn't stay away from basketball for long. In 2010, he made an unexpected move. He became the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets. This was a surprising decision for many. Jordan, the player who had conquered the NBA, was now taking on a new challenge. No longer on the court, he was now going to shape a team as an owner. Many questioned whether Jordan, known for his on-court success, would be able to transfer his winning mentality to the front office. Would he be as successful in this new role? Could he bring the Hornets back to prominence? The Hornets, at the time of Jordan's purchase, were far from a championship-caliber team. They had a few bright spots, but their overall performance was inconsistent. The team lacked an identity and had never experienced the same level of success that Jordan had achieved during his time with the Bulls. Still, Jordan was no stranger to adversity. Throughout his career, he had faced numerous challenges, both on the court and off. Whether it was overcoming being cut from his high school team, the heartbreak of losing his father, or the pressure of maintaining his legendary status, Jordan had always found a way to rise above. Now, as an owner, he was determined to bring that same mentality to Charlotte. Jordan's impact on the Hornets wasn't immediate, and the road to rebuilding was slow. His first few years as owner were filled with ups and downs. The team wasn't performing well, and many were beginning to question his ability to lead an organization. But Jordan wasn't deterred. He approached his ownership with the same determination that had defined his career as a player. He understood that building a winning team wasn't something that could be accomplished overnight. It took time, patience, and the right mix of talent. He was willing to give it all he had, even if it meant facing the criticism of others. Despite the challenges, Jordan's leadership began to make a difference. He worked tirelessly to create a team-oriented culture in Charlotte. Jordan brought in people who shared his vision for the future, including general manager Rich Cho and head coach Steve Clifford. He made changes to the team structure, aiming to develop a more balanced roster. The franchise's primary focus was building from the ground up, developing young talent, and fostering a competitive mindset. Jordan knew that success wouldn't come from just adding big-name players. He needed a team that could grow and gel together, just as the Bulls had when he first arrived in Chicago. The Hornets slowly began to improve. In the 2013-14 season, the team made the playoffs for the first time in several years, a sign that the franchise was heading in the right direction. The team's defensive mindset, inspired by Jordan's legendary competitive nature, began to take shape. The Hornets weren't championship contenders, but they were no longer a laughingstock. They had a purpose, and they had Jordan's leadership to thank for that. Jordan's ownership didn't just focus on the players, he also worked on creating a more engaging fan experience. He understood the importance of community and knew that winning off the court was just as important as winning on it. Under his leadership, the Hornets made significant investments in their facilities, including a revamped arena and better amenities for fans. Jordan wanted to make the Hornets a team that not only performed well, but one that the community could rally behind. His involvement in the community was hands-on, and he worked to ensure that the franchise became an integral part of Charlotte's identity. Jordan's influence on the team was also seen in the way he mentored young players. His own experiences as a player had taught him invaluable lessons, and he wanted to pass that knowledge along to the next generation of stars. Players like Kemba Walker and Cody Zeller benefited from his guidance, and Jordan's presence at practices and games provided them with a model of what it meant to be a professional. His leadership wasn't limited to the front office, it permeated throughout the entire organization. He was a mentor, a teacher, and a constant reminder of what it took to succeed at the highest level. Despite the challenges, Jordan's investment in the Hornets began to pay off. The team became more competitive, and their culture started to reflect Jordan's own relentless pursuit of excellence. By the 2015-16 season, the Hornets had reached the playoffs again. It wasn't a championship, but it was a sign of progress. Jordan was no longer just an owner, he was a symbol of hope for a franchise that had been struggling for years. His journey had come full circle, from a young man looking for success to a seasoned businessman who had helped turn a struggling team into a competitive force. Jordan's transition from player to owner was a testament to his resilience and adaptability. His ability to navigate the complexities of ownership showed that his leadership qualities extended beyond the basketball court. He was no longer the dominant player who could take over a game with a dunk or a jump shot. Instead, he was the guiding force behind a franchise, using his vast experience to lead the Hornets to a brighter future. In the years since Jordan took over the Hornets, the franchise has made steady progress. While a championship hasn't yet materialized, the team has developed a strong foundation, and Jordan's leadership remains integral to their success. His legacy as a player will never be forgotten, but his impact on the game extends far beyond his time on the court. Michael Jordan has become a symbol of excellence, not just as a basketball player, but as a businessman, mentor, and leader. As the Hornets continue their journey, Michael Jordan's influence is still felt. He remains involved in every aspect of the organization, from player development to fan engagement. His legacy as a player has transformed into a legacy as an owner, a legacy built on the same principles that made him great on the court. And while the Hornets may not yet be championship contenders, one thing is certain: Michael Jordan's commitment to greatness has left an indelible mark on the NBA, and it will continue to influence the game for generations to come. The legacy of Michael Jordan transcended his playing days in ways few could have predicted. After his second retirement in 1999, he had set the basketball world on fire with his 6 championships, 5 MVP awards, and countless iconic moments. But his story did not end with his final shot on the court. Jordan's influence, both on and off the court, would continue to reverberate throughout the world of basketball and beyond. In the years following his departure from the NBA, Jordan's name remained synonymous with greatness. His impact wasn't confined to just his performances on the hardwood, it was about how he shaped the culture of basketball itself. His Air Jordan brand, created in partnership with Nike, became one of the most successful and iconic sneaker lines ever created. The Jumpman logo became a global symbol not just of basketball, but of excellence and success. Jordan's marketability was unparalleled. He became the face of advertisements, from Gatorade to McDonald's, and his charisma and star power allowed him to break boundaries and redefine the role of athletes in commercial culture. But despite the financial success and global recognition, Jordan's love for the game remained as strong as ever. He had given his all to basketball, not just in terms of physical effort, but mentally as well. Basketball had been his life, and he had poured everything into the game. Yet, as much as he wanted to stay away from it after his final retirement, the pull of the court, the competition, and the challenge of leading a team to success was something he couldn't entirely shake. It wasn't long before Jordan's competitive fire led him back to the sport, this time in a new role. In 2010, he took a significant step into the world of basketball ownership by purchasing a controlling stake in the Charlotte Hornets. At the time, the Hornets were a struggling franchise with limited success. Jordan, however, saw an opportunity. His decision to invest in the Hornets wasn't just a business venture, it was a way to stay connected to the sport he loved. He was no longer chasing titles as a player, but as an owner, he hoped to build a team that could succeed and perhaps, one day, compete for championships once again. When Jordan took over the Hornets, it wasn't without skepticism. Many people questioned whether the greatest player the NBA had ever seen could transition into a successful owner. Could Jordan, whose competitive nature had fueled him to unimaginable heights on the court, find success off the court? His legacy as a player had been built on winning, and now he would face the difficult task of building a winning team from the ground up. From the moment he took ownership, Jordan proved that his commitment to success had not changed. He immersed himself in the daily operations of the team, making key decisions about player acquisitions, coaching staff, and team culture. He knew that building a championship team wasn't something that could be done in a year or two. It would take patience, strategy, and most importantly, a commitment to the same values that had led him to success as a player. Jordan wasn't simply a figurehead for the Hornets, he was an active part of the team's development. He worked closely with the team's general managers and coaching staff, offering guidance and input on everything from draft picks to player development. He wasn't just managing a team, he was investing in its future. He was determined to bring the same level of excellence that had defined his career to the organization, hoping to instill a winning mentality throughout the entire franchise. Under Jordan's ownership, the Hornets began to show signs of progress. While they weren't instant contenders, there was a noticeable change in the team's culture. The players began to adopt Jordan's work ethic and competitive nature. The team's defense, in particular, improved significantly, with the Hornets becoming one of the more defensively minded teams in the league. This shift reflected Jordan's values, commitment, toughness, and accountability. The Hornets might not have been championship caliber immediately, but they were no longer the laughingstock of the league. They had become a respectable team, one with a clear identity. Jordan's work in Charlotte wasn't about fast results. He understood that success in the NBA, just like success on the court, took time. He was willing to be patient, but his expectations for the team were clear. The goal was always to compete for championships. In the years following his purchase of the Hornets, Jordan made several key moves, drafting young talent and positioning the team for future success. The Hornets may not have been playoff contenders immediately, but under Jordan's leadership, the franchise began to build the foundation for sustained success. Throughout this process, Jordan remained deeply involved in the lives of his players. His mentorship extended beyond the basketball court. He took a hands-on approach to player development, offering advice, guidance, and an example of what it meant to be a professional. Jordan's leadership style was still defined by his willingness to lead by example. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He made it clear to his players that success was earned, not given. The path to greatness was paved by hard work, sacrifice, and a relentless desire to improve every single day. The Hornets slowly began to improve, and in 2014, they made the playoffs for the first time in several years. It was a major accomplishment for the franchise, and it signaled that the rebuilding process was paying off. The team was far from being a championship contender, but they were competitive. More importantly, they had Jordan's leadership and vision guiding them. Jordan's tenure as an owner had a deeper impact than just on-court performance. His story and his success became a symbol for those working in the front office. Players and staff alike saw him not only as a legendary player but as a businessman with an unshakable drive to succeed. The work ethic that defined his playing career was now a part of the fabric of the Hornets organization. Off the court, Jordan's influence continued to be felt in ways that extended beyond basketball. His success as an entrepreneur had far-reaching effects, and his investments in various industries made him one of the most well-rounded and accomplished individuals in sports. He had successfully navigated the transition from athlete to businessman, something few athletes had done as seamlessly as he had. As the Hornets continued their journey, Michael Jordan's leadership became a beacon for future generations. His ownership and guidance of the team brought a sense of direction and purpose to an organization that had long struggled. While the Hornets had yet to win a championship during his tenure, Jordan's impact was undeniable. His investment in the franchise, both financially and emotionally, had revitalized a team and a city, and his legacy as an owner was being shaped by the same values that had made him the greatest basketball player the world had ever known. Jordan's influence in Charlotte showed that his role in basketball was far from over. Even though he had left the game of basketball as a player, his love for the sport and his desire to give back remained at the core of his identity. The game had changed, and Jordan had changed with it, finding new ways to shape the future of the NBA. His story continued to evolve, and with it, the impact he had on the sport was just as powerful as it had ever been. The years following Michael Jordan's second retirement were marked by significant changes in the basketball landscape. The NBA, while still thriving, had entered a new era. Players like Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal were dominating the league, creating their own legacies. Jordan's absence was felt by both fans and players. He had set a standard for excellence that was unmatched. But even as new stars rose to prominence, Jordan's shadow loomed large. His legacy had reshaped the NBA, and his presence remained even though he was no longer actively playing. During these years, Jordan's influence was felt in multiple arenas. His impact wasn't just confined to the court, it had expanded to the business world, where he had become one of the most successful athlete entrepreneurs of all time. His Air Jordan line, in collaboration with Nike, had become a cultural phenomenon, with sneakers selling out in minutes, influencing not only the world of sports fashion but mainstream culture at large. His ability to cross over from being just a player to becoming a global icon was unparalleled. He had revolutionized how athletes engaged with brands and how they were marketed to the public. But for all the fame, fortune, and recognition, Jordan's love for basketball never truly faded. Even in retirement, he stayed connected to the game. Whether it was appearing at NBA games, offering insight as a commentator, or simply staying in touch with former teammates and colleagues, Jordan's connection to the sport remained strong. Basketball had defined his life, and though he wasn't actively competing, it continued to be a driving force behind everything he did. In 2010, Jordan surprised many by purchasing a controlling stake in the Charlotte Hornets. At first glance, it seemed like an unexpected move. After all, Jordan had reached the pinnacle of success as a player and had accomplished everything most athletes only dreamed of. What more could he possibly want? But for Jordan, this was a new challenge. It wasn't just about business, it was about bringing a struggling franchise to the top, about creating something lasting and meaningful, just as he had done with the Chicago Bulls. The Hornets were a team in disarray at the time of Jordan's purchase. They were far removed from the championship-caliber teams Jordan had been a part of, and they lacked the kind of leadership and cohesion that had characterized his earlier teams. Many skeptics questioned whether a former player, no matter how great, could succeed in an executive role. The challenges ahead for Jordan were significant, but for someone who had always thrived under pressure, this felt like just another opportunity to prove himself. Jordan's approach to ownership was immediately apparent. He wasn't just looking to make financial gains, he wanted to transform the Hornets into a contender. He threw himself into the team, from hiring the right general managers to having a hands-on role in evaluating players and shaping the team's culture. Jordan brought the same relentless drive to the Hornets that had made him a six-time NBA champion. But this time, it wasn't just about scoring points and winning titles, it was about shaping a franchise that could be successful both on and off the court. In the early years of Jordan's ownership, the Hornets struggled. The team wasn't immediately competitive, and there were growing pains as Jordan adjusted to his new role. Ownership and management were a far cry from playing on the court, and Jordan quickly learned the complexities of running a team. However, his focus on building a winning culture remained. He understood that success wasn't going to come instantly. It took time, patience, and a long-term vision. He wasn't just building a team of talent, he was building a team of character, one where each player understood the importance of playing the right way and working hard every single day. Jordan's ownership wasn't just about making moves that brought immediate success. It was about creating the foundation for sustained success. He knew that if the Hornets were ever going to compete at a high level again, they had to develop young talent and build a team that could grow together. In his early years as an owner, Jordan made a series of moves that would lay the groundwork for the franchise's future. He invested in the team's facilities and infrastructure, worked to build relationships with local fans, and made efforts to revitalize the brand. In addition to player acquisitions, Jordan was focused on the culture of the team. He made it clear that mediocrity was unacceptable, and he demanded a level of professionalism that reflected the championship mindset he had carried throughout his career. This culture was built around hard work, accountability, and a commitment to winning, values that had defined Jordan's career as a player and were now being instilled in the organization's DNA. While the Hornets weren't immediately championship contenders under Jordan's ownership, progress was visible. Young players like Kemba Walker began to emerge as the faces of the franchise, and the team's defense, in particular, became a strength. The Hornets weren't just a team with talent, they were a team with a mentality. Under Jordan's leadership, the organization took on a new identity, one focused on competing with intensity and purpose. In 2014, the Hornets made their first playoff appearance in years, and while they weren't able to make a deep run, it was a significant step forward. The team was no longer a laughingstock in the NBA. They were competitive, and they had the backing of a passionate fan base. Jordan's commitment to rebuilding the team had begun to bear fruit. The franchise still had a long way to go, but the foundation for a successful future was now firmly in place. Jordan's ownership was also marked by his personal connection to the city of Charlotte and the Hornets fans. He was involved in the community in ways that went beyond basketball. Jordan understood that being an owner was about more than just making decisions related to the team. It was about giving back to the people who supported the franchise. He took an active role in engaging with fans, hosting events, and making sure the Hornets were integrated into the fabric of the community. Under Jordan's leadership, the Hornets slowly started to climb up the NBA ranks. The team became more competitive, and the culture that Jordan had helped to establish was paying off. The Hornets made the playoffs again in the 2015-16 season, and while they weren't yet championship contenders, the franchise had a renewed sense of hope. For Jordan, the journey was just beginning. The dream of returning a team to glory, of building something lasting, was within reach. It wasn't about personal glory or recognition, it was about creating something that would endure. In many ways, Jordan's impact on the Hornets reflected his overall approach to life and basketball. His career had never been about taking the easy road. He had faced adversity, overcome challenges, and continually pushed himself to be the best. In the front office, he took the same approach. Even though he had accomplished everything as a player, Jordan's hunger for success remained unquenchable. His legacy as an owner was still unfolding, but it was clear that he was shaping the future of the Hornets with the same intensity and passion that had made him a legend on the court. Despite the ups and downs of ownership, Michael Jordan's story had come full circle. He had gone from a young player dreaming of success to an NBA icon, and now, as an owner, he was redefining what it meant to be a champion. His journey was never just about one victory, it was about the pursuit of greatness. Even in the later stages of his career, Jordan was still determined to leave a lasting impact on the sport that had given him everything. Through his ownership of the Hornets, Michael Jordan continued to shape the game, not just as a player, but as a mentor, a leader, and a visionary. His legacy, built on sacrifice, hard work, and excellence, would continue to influence generations of players and basketball fans alike. As Michael Jordan settled into his role as the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets, a new chapter began in his storied career. No longer chasing championships as a player, Jordan now had the opportunity to shape a franchise from a different perspective. The challenges were different, but the principles were the same, a relentless pursuit of excellence and a commitment to building something meaningful. It was clear that Jordan's competitive nature, which had defined his legendary basketball career, would drive him as an owner just as it had on the court. In the years that followed his purchase of the Hornets in 2010, Jordan remained as involved and hands-on as possible. He wasn't just content to sit back and let others run the team. Instead, he was deeply engaged in every aspect of the franchise's operations. Whether it was scouting players, evaluating draft prospects, or providing input on coaching decisions, Jordan's leadership was apparent at every level. He wasn't just leading the team from the front office, he was shaping its identity and culture, much in the same way he had done with the Bulls. At the time of his purchase, the Hornets were far from a championship contender. The franchise had experienced years of inconsistency and underperformance. Jordan, however, knew that transforming a team wasn't something that happened overnight. He understood the importance of building a sustainable, long-term plan, just as he had in his playing days when the Bulls went from a group of individuals to a well-coordinated championship machine. He was intent on making sure the Hornets not only had the talent but also the right mindset to eventually compete with the league's best. During his early years as an owner, Jordan focused on two key elements: player development and creating a culture of accountability. While the team didn't immediately find success in the win column, there was a noticeable shift in how the Hornets approached their work. Jordan made it clear that mediocrity was unacceptable. Every player, from the young stars to the seasoned veterans, had to earn their spot on the team. This philosophy was rooted in his own journey. Jordan had never been handed anything. He had fought for every achievement, and now, as an owner, he expected his players to do the same. Despite the early struggles, there were positive signs of progress. The Hornets started to develop a more balanced team, and players like Kemba Walker began to emerge as key contributors. Walker, in particular, became a focal point for the franchise. Jordan took a special interest in Walker's development, offering advice and guidance, just as he had done with his teammates during his playing days. It was clear that Jordan's mentorship was having an impact. The Hornets weren't yet contenders, but they had found their leader in Walker, and the future seemed brighter than it had in years. In addition to player development, Jordan put significant effort into rebuilding the team's identity. The Hornets had once been a proud franchise, and Jordan was determined to restore that pride. One of his first major moves was changing the team's name back to the Charlotte Hornets, after the franchise had briefly been known as the Bobcats. This move wasn't just symbolic, it was about reconnecting the team with its history and reigniting the fanbase's passion. Jordan knew that a winning team required more than just on-court success. It needed the support of the community, and restoring the Hornets name was a step in re-engaging the fanbase. Jordan's influence also extended to the team's culture. He placed a heavy emphasis on defense, knowing that in the NBA, championships are often won with grit and determination, not just with flashy scoring. The Hornets, under Jordan's leadership, began to take on the mentality of a team that would fight for every inch. This shift didn't happen instantly. It took time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But with Jordan's relentless drive leading the charge, the Hornets started to take on his persona: tough, competitive, and unwilling to back down from any challenge. While the team was still in the process of building its future, the fruits of Jordan's labor began to show. The 2013 to 2014 season saw the Hornets return to the playoffs for the first time in several years. Though they didn't make it far in the postseason, the mere fact that they had made the playoffs was a huge step for the franchise. The team was finally heading in the right direction, and Jordan's leadership was a big reason for that. The Hornets were no longer a laughingstock, they were competitive, and they had Jordan's vision and work ethic to thank. However, despite the improvement, there were still challenges ahead. The NBA is a league where success is not just about getting to the playoffs, it's about contending for championships. And while the Hornets were improving, they were still a long way from that goal. As the years went on, Jordan continued to make moves to bolster the team's roster. He invested in drafting young talent and sought out veteran players who could contribute to the team's growth. His experience as a player allowed him to understand what it took to win, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that the Hornets were building a team that could eventually compete for titles. One of the biggest hurdles Jordan faced as an owner was the constant comparison to his playing days. Jordan had set such a high bar that every move he made, every decision he took, was scrutinized. Critics were quick to point out the team's struggles or question his decisions, but Jordan never wavered. He knew that the road to success was never smooth, and he was willing to take the long path if it meant getting the Hornets to the top. His ability to stay focused on the bigger picture was a testament to his leadership. He wasn't concerned with short-term gratification. His goal was always long-term success, and he was determined to achieve it. In the years following the Hornets' return to the playoffs, Jordan continued to invest in both the team and the community. His vision for the Hornets wasn't just about basketball, it was about building a lasting legacy. He worked on establishing the franchise as a respected, competitive organization that could stand the test of time. He knew that the NBA was evolving, and if the Hornets were going to compete in the future, they needed to adapt to the changing landscape of the league. Despite the challenges of ownership, Jordan's influence on the Hornets was undeniable. The team had taken significant steps forward since he took control, and his leadership was a big part of that growth. The players may not have reached the heights that Jordan had achieved as a player, but they were striving to live up to the standards he had set. The Hornets, under Jordan's guidance, had become a more competitive team. More importantly, they had adopted the mentality that Jordan had instilled in his teammates during his playing days, the mentality of a champion. Jordan's journey as an owner was far from over. While the Hornets had not yet reached the pinnacle of the NBA, they had made substantial progress. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: Michael Jordan's commitment to excellence, both on and off the court, had transformed the Hornets into a team with promise and potential. His leadership had already made a lasting impact on the franchise, and with time, the Hornets would continue to build on that foundation. In the years to come, Jordan's legacy as an owner would be defined by his unwavering determination, his work ethic, and his ability to inspire others. As a player, he had redefined greatness. As an owner, he was shaping the future of the NBA, and his influence on the sport would continue to be felt long after his time with the Hornets had passed. Michael Jordan had proven that his greatness wasn't just limited to the basketball court, it extended into every facet of his life. Through his ownership of the Hornets, he had cemented his legacy as a leader, a mentor, and a visionary. Michael Jordan's impact on the NBA was undeniable. When he retired for the second time in 1999, the world believed it was the end of an era. Yet, his story didn't conclude on that note. In the years that followed, Jordan's legacy continued to grow, not just as a basketball player, but as a businessman, mentor, and philanthropist. His return to basketball as the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets in 2010 brought a new chapter to his story, one that proved just as challenging as his years on the court, yet just as fulfilling in its own way. When Jordan bought the Hornets, many questioned whether the greatest player in NBA history could succeed in a new role. After all, leading a franchise wasn't the same as leading a team on the court. There were no game-winning shots to make or buzzer beaters to sink. But for Jordan, it wasn't about recreating his playing career, it was about creating a lasting impact on the game from a new vantage point. He was no longer chasing championships for himself. Now, his goal was to build something that would stand the test of time. His journey in Charlotte wasn't a quick fix. The Hornets had been a franchise in turmoil, struggling with inconsistency and lack of direction. However, Jordan's approach was methodical and patient. He didn't expect immediate success, but he wanted to create a culture that could eventually lead to sustained winning. His work ethic, determination, and passion for the game were as evident in his role as an owner as they had been during his playing career. He had faced challenges before, whether it was being cut from his high school team or overcoming personal tragedy, and he was prepared to face them again. Jordan's leadership style was rooted in the same values that made him great as a player. He instilled discipline, accountability, and the relentless drive to succeed in his team. His hands-on approach was not just about managing a franchise, but about setting the tone for how the team should operate. He worked with general managers and coaches, offering his input on player acquisitions and developing strategies that would help the Hornets become a competitive force in the league. While the road to success for the Hornets was slow, the team began to show signs of improvement. In the 2013-14 season, they made the playoffs for the first time in several years. It wasn't a championship run, but it was a significant step forward for a franchise that had been struggling for so long. The Hornets were no longer the league's doormat. They were competitive, and with Jordan at the helm, they had a foundation to build upon. Jordan's leadership extended beyond basketball. He understood that the Hornets were not just a team, they were a symbol of the city of Charlotte. He worked to reconnect the team with its fanbase, reviving the Hornets' name and logo, which had been lost after the team was renamed the Bobcats in the early 2000s. By bringing back the Hornets' identity, Jordan not only honored the team's past, but also reignited the pride of the local community. This move helped create a stronger connection between the franchise and its fans, fostering a sense of loyalty and excitement that had been lacking for years. As the team continued to grow, Jordan's role as a mentor became more and more apparent. He wasn't just shaping a roster, he was shaping a mindset. He spent time with young players, offering them advice on how to approach their careers and how to handle the pressures of being in the NBA. His leadership wasn't about shouting from the sidelines, it was about leading by example, showing the players how to work hard, how to be mentally tough, and how to push through adversity. Even as the team's success didn't match the heights of his playing days, Jordan's influence was undeniable. The Hornets were developing a new identity, one built on hard work and discipline, much like the teams Jordan had led to victory. It wasn't about flashy plays or big names, it was about the team's collective effort and commitment to the process. Jordan wasn't concerned with immediate results. He knew that building a championship-caliber team would take time. His leadership was laying the groundwork for a future that would pay dividends. In the years that followed, the Hornets became a more competitive team in the NBA. They weren't yet contenders, but the foundation was there. The young talent they had developed, like Kemba Walker, was coming into its own, and the team's defense, which Jordan had emphasized, was one of the league's strongest. Jordan was proving that, while he might not be on the court scoring 30 points a game, his influence was still just as powerful. The Hornets, under his leadership, had begun to establish themselves as a team that could make noise in the playoffs and perhaps one day challenge for a championship. But Jordan's legacy as an owner wasn't just about winning on the court. He had already achieved that as a player. Now, his impact was about creating something that would last. He understood that being a champion was not just about titles, it was about the people you influenced and the culture you helped create. Jordan's story, even in retirement, was still one of growth and transformation. As an owner, he wasn't just working to build a team, he was working to shape the next generation of players, coaches, and basketball fans. His impact would be felt for years, long after the games were over. Jordan's leadership as an owner was also a lesson in resilience. The Hornets had faced their share of struggles. They had moments of doubt, tough losses, and setbacks. But through it all, Jordan remained committed. His ability to face adversity and bounce back was a hallmark of his career as a player, and it was now shaping his tenure as an owner. He showed that the road to success was never easy, but it was worth the effort. His story was proof that greatness could evolve, adapt, and take on new forms. As the years went by, Jordan's influence on the Hornets continued to grow. Under his guidance, the franchise became more competitive and developed a winning culture. The team, once an afterthought in the NBA, was now one that had a chance to succeed in the future. The Hornets weren't yet champions, but Jordan's legacy was already secure. He had proven that his greatness wasn't limited to the basketball court. His impact on the game would never fade, and his story would continue to inspire future generations of players and fans. Jordan's journey had come full circle. From a young, hungry player with something to prove to a global icon, and now, as an owner, shaping the future of the game. His impact, both on and off the court, had been profound. He had redefined what it meant to be great, not just through his skills, but through his leadership, his work ethic, and his commitment to success. The story of Michael Jordan was not just one of individual glory, it was the story of a man who changed the game and continues to influence it in ways that will last long after his time in the spotlight. As the Hornets' journey continues, and as Jordan's legacy as an owner becomes even more established, one thing is clear: Michael Jordan's influence on basketball will never fade. He has left a mark on the game, on the NBA, and on the world that will be felt for generations to come.